Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and selamat sejahtera. Welcome back to another online lecture session. My name is Madam Siti Mahayan binti Hashim. I will present about chapter 4, Genetic Inheritance. This chapter can be divided into two subtopics, 4.1 Mendelian Genetic and 4.2 Deviation from the Mendelian Inheritance. Today, our focus on 4.1 Mendelian Genetic, Monohybrid and Dihybrid. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to A. State terminologies used in genetic inheritance. B. State Mendels First Law or Law of Segregation, and C. State Mendels Second Law or Law of Independent Assortment. Let's start with the terminologies. There are 11 terminologies used in genetic inheritance. First, gene. Gene is a basic hereditary unit that determines a specific characteristic in the organism. Genes are located on a specific locus of a chromosome. It consists of DNA segments that encode particular protein. Second, allele. An allele is an alternative form of a gene that is located at a specific position on a specific chromosome, represented by alphabet. Allele can be divided into two, dominant allele and recessive allele. Dominant allele is an allele that is fully expressed in the phenotype of a heterozygote. It masks the effect of other alleles paired with it, shown by capital letter. For example, dominant allele that determine the pod shape of garden pea, capital P for inflated pod shape. While recessive allele is an allele whose phenotypic effect is not observed in a heterozygote. Its effect is masked by the dominant allele paired with it, shown by lowercase letter. For example, recessive allele that determine the pod shape of a garden pea, lowercase p for constricted pod shape. Next, locus. Locus is a specific location or site of a gene on a chromosome that controls specific trait. Trait refer to a heritable difference. The diagram shows a locus for flower color gene on homologous pair of chromosomes. Genotype. Genotype is a particular genetic constituent of an individual. Genetic constituent refer to combination of alleles. For example, there are two genotypes that control inflated pod shape of a garden pea. Capital PP for homozygous dominant and capital P lowercase p for heterozygous. The genotype that controls the constricted pod shape of a garden pea, lowercase pp for homozygous recessive. Next, phenotype. Phenotype is a physical characteristics of physical appearance determined by the genotype. Phenotype can be divided into two, dominant phenotypes and recessive phenotype. For example, character is pod shape. Dominant phenotype is inflated pod shape determined by two genotypes, capital PP or capital P lowercase p. And recessive phenotype is constricted pod shape determined by one genotype, lowercase pp. Homozygous. Homozygous is when having two identical alleles for a given gene. Homozygous can be divided into two, homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive. For example, capital BB is homozygous dominant, while lowercase bb is homozygous recessive. Heterozygous. Heterozygous is when having two different alleles for a given gene. For example, capital B, lowercase b. The capital letter is always preceded the lowercase, and the heterozygous pair only determine dominant trait. Safe cross is a cross between organisms of the same generation. For example, a crossing between individuals in F1 generation, F1 cross F1. The last terminology is test cross. Test cross is a cross between an organism of a recessive phenotype and another organism of dominant phenotype but of unknown genotype. It is used to determine the genotype of an individual with the dominant phenotype. The individual must have one dominant allele, but the individual could be either homozygous dominant or heterozygous. If all the offspring are dominant phenotype, the unknown genotype is homozygous dominant. If any of the offspring display the recessive phenotype, the unknown genotype is heterozygous. Now, we learn about the definition of monohybrid and dihybrid cross. Monohybrid cross is a genetic cross between parents of one characteristic with a different trait derived from one particular gene. The parental organisms involved in this cross are purebred, either homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive. For example, the crossing between a pea plant with purple flower, capital PP, with a pea plant with white flower, lowercase pp. Mendels First Law, or also known as Law of Segregation. The definition of Mendels First Law is each characteristic is controlled by two alleles which will segregate, and each allele is transferred to each gamete as shown in the diagram. For example, seed shape of cardon pea. The dominant allele for seed shape is round, capital R, while the recessive allele for seed shape is wrinkled, lowercase r. The homologous chromosome will undergo meiosis process. After the cytokinesis occurs, each gamete carries only one allele for seed shape because the allele have segregated during meiosis. The definition of dihybrid cross is a genetic cross between parents of two characteristics with different traits derived from two different genes. Both parental organisms involved are purebred. For example, pea plant with two characteristics. First character is seed color and the second is seed shape. Mendels Second Law, or also known as Law of Independent Assortment. The definition of Mendels Second Law is each pair of allele segregates independently of the other pairs of allele during gamete formation. If independent assortment occur, the F1 generation will produce only 4 kinds of gametes as shown in the diagram.
You got to go.
Before our lecture session ends, let's test your knowledge about today's lesson. Please answer the following question. Question 1. Question 2.
You got to go.